Okay, some comments today that were kind of curious from Nick Saban about the 2021 season. I want to read you exactly what he said, and you can read about it over on Dog Post. He says last year we kind of had a rebuilding year. Um, we should have had nine starters back on offense and nine on defense, but six guys go out early for the draft, and we have five back offense on offense and seven back on defense. That in and of itself creates more question marks, but it also creates opportunity for other players to be able to shine in the program and be able to contribute in a positive way. So nobody knows for sure how this stuff is going to go, is going to come into fruition, but that's part of the excitement and challenge we have to be able to develop a team. So there's a few things um, that are going on here at once. When you say we kind of had a rebuilding year, first of all, that is true. Alabama was not the best team in the country last year, and certainly over the last decade or whatever, that would qualify as a rebuilding year at Alabama. Okay, I think that had some. They had a lot of games a season ago, and I write about this over on Dog Post, the article you just saw that were real fights for them. Georgia really didn't have that a season ago. I mean, the Clemson game was close, maybe closer the score was maybe closer than it really kind of was. The Kentucky game was a bit of a fight. Auburn was slightly that way. I mean, Alabama had to survive Auburn, which they almost did not do. I mean, that was a hell of a performance from Alabama. And then you had the loss to Texas A&M. They just did look. Alabama didn't play well that night. Okay, they scored a bunch of points, but they did not play well the way they needed to. But it wasn't just those games. It was the Florida game. It was the LSU game. It was Arkansas. And there's no question that the West is more difficult than the East. But the teams I just mentioned, I mean, Georgia played three of them and buried Arkansas, buried Florida, and ran away from Auburn. So I think that when you start talking about last season at Alabama, I think they had, if that was rebuilding, I think they had an exceptional year. I think they had an exceptional year no matter what you're calling it. I mean, you're saying that a conference championship year and a year that you win, your quarterback wins a Heisman Trophy, that's an exceptional year. Okay, so that's back to back. I think Heisman Trophy winners at Alabama these last 2 years, if my memory's correct. Devonta Smith and then Bryce Young. So at some stage they will have someone that will not win the Heisman. But anyway, um, I think the problem with what Nick said is that now it's 2022. And when you make those comments, whereas I don't think he meant it in a derogatory way towards Georgia or Kirby or anybody like that, now we're talking about it, right? I mean, it's not, I think he was being honest. I think he's correct about it being a rebuilding year. But just because it's not a quote rebuilding year in 22 doesn't mean that you're going to win the national championship. And I think that's the part to me that is so that when we have these sort of honest moments. That's why being in the public is can be tricky sometimes. Make sure you're picking up DAWGSTRUCTION. We are including our 2022 preview in it. If you've not seen this yet, well, the only place you can see it is at Red Zone on Clayton Street in Athens. This is only available at Red Zone and online, so make sure you're picking it up. The link is down below. We have, I mean, there's just stuff in here you're not going to find anywhere else. So you grab the book and you get the preview. It is included for free. If you just need the preview, it's down below. Anybody who's an annual subscriber at Dog Post, you will be getting this in the mail shortly. So, you know, Nick, so, Kirby seems to be Kirby seems to be more disciplined in terms of what he says in front of the media. They're both pretty good about that. Kirby's had a better run. The I thought about retiring joke or whatever that was. Um, you know, guys say what they mean. You can say you're joking about it. I mean, Nick Saban was not joking when he was on WJOX when he said, we had a kind of a rebuilding you. He did. They did. And I think though that puts pressure on this year for sure. Now there's always pressure at Alabama, at Georgia, at these big schools in the SEC. It's just what it is, okay? But when you unknowingly or not on purpose take a what's going to be construed as a swipe at Georgia, they're going to remember that. And these two teams may or may not play this fall. We don't know, or this winter. We know they will not play in the fall. Um, and that's going to be something that is brought up. Now, by that point, the 21 game will not matter at all. I mean, the SEC championship game didn't matter in Indianapolis. I mean, if we're being honest. So, is Georgia rebuilding this year? If Georgia is rebuilding, which by Nick's definition they are, getting to the national championship would be a massive accomplishment, and it would be uh, a disappointing commentary from Kirby to follow that up with saying, "Hey, we had a rebuilding year." Look, these two programs have won the last two national championships. They have, in that sense, separated themselves from the rest of college football. I think Ohio State's with them, but that's me. And I just did something over on Dog Post where I added up the teams who have finished in the top five over the last since 2017. There's only been a few of those teams, and Alabama against those teams is 8-2. They lost to Clemson in 18, lost to Georgia in 20. So of the elite schools of the last 5 years, uh, Nick's team has clearly been better than everybody else. Georgia's been 4-4 in that time. Clemson was 4-4. Ohio State, I keep mentioning them, and I don't know where I put that post, but here it is. Um, Schools with two or more top five finishes since 2017. Alabama has four, Clemson has four, Ohio State has four, Georgia with three, OU with three, Notre Dame with two. Alabama's record against those teams in that time 8-2. Georgia 4-4, Clemson 4-4, Oklahoma 1-2, Ohio State 1-3, Notre Dame 1-5. So maybe we should be saying Clemson, Georgia, and Alabama. The difference is though that Ohio State's not coming off playing in the Cheez-It Bowl and didn't have their assistant coaches wiped out just now. So there's some skepticism about the trajectory of Clemson, but we'll just see, right? I mean, and Ohio State being 1-3, I mean they're only winning in that times against Clemson. They lost to Alabama. I think they certainly lost to Alabama. I don't know if they lost to Clemson twice. So they had two losses to Clemson. Is that right? And then one to Alabama. They made it. Yeah, they did in 18, I believe. Well, anyway, the point is that those teams have been very good, and was last year rebuilding for Clemson? Was that rebuilding? I mean, there was a lot of struggling that went on by Alabama, and their struggles seemed less severe than Clemson's struggles did. Was 2020 a rebuilding year for Georgia? I mean, I find it hard to categorize any of the last 5 years at Georgia as rebuilding. Looking back on it, like Nick did, um, I just I don't know if 18 was rebuilding. It didn't seem like it at the time. Uh, 19 might have been. Okay. That's a good question. In 19, I think Georgia finished number three in the country or four, whatever it was. I'd have to remember. 19, they were number four in the country. So yeah. So I just the only two times that they did not finish in the top five, Georgia was in 18 and 20. 20 was such a weird year. Would Georgia have beaten Notre Dame in 2020? I mean, it might have depended on who the quarterback was at the time. Georgia's pretty good at the end of the season. I mean, the only two losses Cincinnati's had in the last two seasons were to Georgia and Alabama. Those teams didn't win the national championships these seasons that Cincinnati lost to them, but those have been the best too. So I don't think what Nick said is something that's so crazy that you get upset about it. I mean, I don't. But I think that when you say stuff, there are ramifications from it. I mean, we all know that. I talk plenty for a living, and you do wanna choose what you say carefully because people are watching every word that Nick says, that Kirby says, and as we found out earlier this summer, whether he meant it one way or another, what Nick says definitely matters, and it can get him into quote trouble. So that's something to pay attention to. Make sure you're over at Dog Post for the rest of the week. We've got practice coming up. We'll see you on the website.